What does draw a clock mean? Last time I visited my brother, his mother-in-law who lives with him was insisting she remembered something, but my brother knew she was wrong. I don't remember what it was, but I knew she was wrong too. However, she refused to accept she was wrong and got belligerent about it. My brother said, "Draw a clock," and left the room. This made his mother-in-law furious for some reason. I forgot to ask at the time. But does anyone know why saying draw a clock would upset a senior citizen? It's a screening test for dementia. Successfully drawing a clock round face with numbers and the long and short hands is part of a test for cognitive decline, like with Alzheimer's and dementia. Someone who suffers from that will mess up the layout or get lost part way through, etc. Presumably the mother-in-law or other family member has had to take the test and may be in decline or fearing of it. Your brother was accusing them of being mentally unfit. My mother was asked to do that when she got brain cancer as a cognitive function test, and unfortunately what she drew didn't make any sense. She wasn't wrong. It's part of a wellness exam doctors give once a year. You draw a clock and put time at 11:10. They also give 3 words to remember. 5 minutes later they ask you to tell them the words. One thing to keep in mind is that if she does in fact have dementia, then it's time to stop arguing with her about what is and isn't true. You will not convince her. You'll only distress her and cause yourself unnecessary chagrin. Just a PSA for everyone here talking about dementia. There have been studies that show that just walking a mile outdoors every day can help stave off dementia as you get older. Reduce the risk of dementia. Specifically, if it runs in your family. Ride a bike. Walk outdoors every day. Learn a new physical skill, instrument, language. Those things can help preserve the plasticity of your brain. He was saying she had dementia. I used to do CNA work. We often used the drawing clock test to check for cognitive deficits. I've done several of these. For a screening, it's like remember 5 words. Name as many animals as possible. You draw a circle and put the numbers in from 12 to 11. Then they say a time and you have to put hands on the clock correctly. At the end you repeat the 5 words from the beginning. I had to do this to get a cleaner from the ADRC. The well-known use is to test for dementia, like others have said, but it's a general cognitive test. It was part of a test I took for a study about strokes earlier this year. I suffered 2 strokes October 2021, and had signed up for the study while I was still in the hospital. I also had to draw a cube, remember some words given to me at the beginning, and repeat them at the end of the test. Verbally list as many words as I could that started with the letter F or some other letter I forget, and maybe some other stuff. This is either a nasty person lashing out with a low blow at a truly cognitively declining relative, or a super burn on someone smart enough to understand that the insulter is saying they have a mental handicap. When I forget anything my son says to me, "Who is the president?" It's another one of the questions on the dementia screener. It's used as a dementia and possibly other brain-related ailments assessment. Those who are declining cannot do it very well. Never heard it used as an insult. It's a test for dementia. Neither your brother or his mother-in-law behaved appropriately. But it is a very unkind thing to say. As a person who had to be a caregiver for her own demented mom, this is fucking hilarious. New thing to yell at boomers dropped. This doesn't test only for dementia, but for several similar issues. My wife is a nurse who does home health for the elderly. She had to do this test a few weeks back and the guy drew a 12 where it belonged. And then nothing until he got to where the 6 should be. He drew a 13 and said he was done. She reported it to her supervisor and off he went for scans. Turns out, he'd had a stroke no one knew about. No one has mentioned it's also a test for hemineglect post-stroke neurological impact. However, she refused to accept she was wrong and got belligerent about it. Also a sign of dementia. It's part of a dementia test. Fucking brutal. It's something that seems easy for anyone over 5 years old, but it's actually really challenging for people with dementia, Alzheimer's, memory issues. It's often used as a test when people are looking for signs of those diseases. It's a quick test for brain disorders like dementia. It's part of a test they do to screen for Alzheimer's dementia. For some reason people with Alzheimer's struggle to do that a lot. Sounds like she was probably tested recently and just got her diagnosis thrown back in her face as if it's some kind of personality flaw. It means your brother is a jerk. Classic test for mental acuity for elderly. It's the first test given when diagnosing early onset dementia and/or Alzheimer's. Draw me a clock, Will. He really upped the ante on OK Boomer. It's basically a mini cognitive test. It's something that people with severe mental deterioration are asked to do. Look up on Google Images encephalopathy clock or Alzheimer's clock and you'll see what they mean. I have to draw a clock once a year when I go in for my annual physical. Before I draw the clock, my doctor says 3 random words to me. After I draw the clock, I have to repeat the words back in the correct order. It's part of United States Medicare policy. They also ask you about recent falls, or if you're safe at home, or if you have any problems performing normal household tasks. That's the test that Donald Trump says he aced. It's part of a specific mental status exam that tests for declining mental state called a MoCA. Common for dementia and other progressive disorders. One part directs the client to draw a clock and the form of the clock determines certain deficits. It's part of the test that Trump thought was an IQ test, but is actually a dementia test called the MoCA. That was a scorcher. It's a test for dementia. Dementia patients are asked to draw a clock. It's also useful in eliminating brain damage or injury due to not being able to seek out a infection in the brain. This is my design. Every one of my psych evals had me draw a clock. Never knew why. I had them done for PTSD. It's a senility test. As you saw from the comments, this is a test for people who are in cognitive decline, usually due to age. That being said, when someone is suffering from dementia, you don't try to correct the bullshit they say because that's pointless. Instead you deflect, or change the subject, or distract them with something else. Otherwise there will be more conflict. Think of a person with dementia as a child who doesn't know better. Just let them say incorrect things and don't worry about it. My mother is 87 now and I've gone with her for many of these tests. She now draws a clock with the numbers on the outside of the circle. But since she's consistent, it's a pass for now. I wonder how many people besides me just hurriedly drew a clock, just to make sure. Dementia test. That's actually hilarious. Good on him. Tears of joy. Geriatric OT here. Draw a clock is a super useful tool for us to assess a ton of things. It's most commonly found on cognitive screens, and depending on what the clock looks like along with the rest of the result, it can actually tell us a bit about what might be going on. Dementia. Side neglect from a stroke. Visual spatial issues with numbers versus letters. One of them is an occupational therapist. Kind of cowardly to ridicule an elderly woman like that, to be honest. All I know is not a soaking clock. Pencil 3 o'clock.